Hey, greetings everyone. It's Naomi Wolf of Outspoken, and I have a really interesting guest today with us, Matthew Mark McWhorter. Welcome, Mr. McWhorter.
Thank you. God bless. Happy to be here.
Oh, it's so nice to have you. So Matthew Mark McWhorter, sorry, my puppy he likes to sit on my lap when I'm podcasting, but he sees a stranger outside, so he's being really
Uh,
scary and growly. Matthew Mark McWhorter is a reformed corporate attorney, now happily retired and living in Columbus, Ohio. What began as a skeptical investigation into the foundations of Christianity led him on an unexpected journey from atheism to belief. Huh. And ultimately to a firm conviction that the Catholic, quote, apocrypha, end quote, were fully embraced by the early church. Drawing on his legal expertise, McWhorter applies courtroom-style analysis to biblical canon debates, exposing inconsistencies in modern Protestant arguments while emphasizing intellectual honesty above all. His first book, Canon Crossfire, Does the Protestant Bible Blow Up the Case for Christianity? You don't mince words, presents a compelling challenge to conventional theology and invites readers to re-examine the evidence for themselves. McWhorter's work is bold, thoroughly researched, and driven by a deep desire for truth, and this is his bio. So on his website,
yeah.
canoncrossfire.com. So let's just start. If I were standing in an elevator and we were stuck and I said, okay, well, what do you do? What's your book about? Could you give me one or two sentences in lay terms explaining what your bio just said, or explaining um, what it means to have embraced all of the Apocrypha, thus embracing what you believe to be early Catholicism, which you believe embraced the Apocrypha, and thus rejecting Protestantism, essentially. Do I have that correct?
Pretty close. Yeah. It's so basically my name being Matthew Mark, I was named after the Bible, but I wasn't raised religious. So late in life, I had major medical problems, and I
I'm sorry.
dive into the question of, I read the books I was named after, and I dive into the question of whether any of this is true. At the same time that I discovered that if you go on Amazon, for example, there's radically different Bibles. There's a Catholic Bible, a Protestant Bible, Orthodox Bibles. The Orthodox do not agree amongst themselves as to what the Orthodox Bible is. Protestants do not agree necessarily amongst themselves. So there's just many different versions of it. And the question I had was, what Bible am I supposed to be reading, and what Bible is supposed to be true, so that I can analyze this as a lawyer. So I had these two questions at the same time, which is, what is Christianity true, and what is the correct Bible? And it was because I was
Mr. McWhorter, sorry to interrupt, but before you go further, why did you care if Christianity was true? I mean, I understand you had a severe medical crisis. Could you
yeah
go into the kind of cause effect a little more? Were
yeah
you
I
wondering what happens
I'm not
after
an
death?
emotional person, so
Mhm.
this was not an epiphany or anything at the time because of my medical problem. It was just I didn't care if you die, the lights just go out. Live the best life you can until then, kind of thing. So I wasn't particularly motivated by this. It was I was named after the Bible, and people were asking me what is on my bucket list, and I was like, well, Grandpa left me those Western cowboy novels that I never got around to reading, so I want to read them. And oh yeah, I was named after the Bible, so I should read that too. That's it.
Mhm. Okay, all
Um,
right.
but
Okay,
it's
so you wanted to know which Bible to read, and you realized there were many, many
exactly.
versions. Okay,
And I was
excuse me.
curious
Sorry,
whether
can
any of this was true. I mean, everybody, most, I knew so many Christians in my life, right? So I'm like,
sure.
is this crazy? Is this a cult? Is this true? Like, what is this? So,
Right. So sorry to keep interrupting, but
mm,
just so you know, I will have questions as you
yeah,
speak. So if I need to interrupt and you
yeah.
might not hear me or there's a lag, I'm just going to raise my hand so
Oh,
that I can ask a question.
old
Um,
school, literally school.
kind of. Uh, so 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 my question is, I think you sort of answered it. Did you not know that there were many versions of the Bible prior to this? You didn't.
I,
You thought they were all one version?
I didn't care what the Bible was, so made no difference to me. I think if I had a Bible, my mom might have given me a children's Bible when I was a kid.
Mhm.
Actually, she did. I do have a children's Bible somewhere in here, but I don't think I ever read it. But it was one of those, like, a gift on your fifth birthday or something. I don't know. But that
Sure,
was it. That's the
right.
closest I came to a Bible.
So I guess I'm asking a sort of different question. And it's not critical at all. I I should give a little background. I'm in the process, as you may know, because probably that's why your booker or producer reached out to me, of reading the Hebrew Masoretic text of the Bible and the 1560 Geneva Bible. And I'm astonished that, so no disrespect to modern Christians, and modern Jews and modern Muslims have their own issues, but I'm astonished that so many modern Christians don't know, the origin of the compilation of the Bible, and don't know, for instance, there are many, many versions, many arguments over authoritative texts, many things left out, many things included, people saying this is the devil's work, that's the devil's work, right? And it's a very important thing to know, right? Because theologians know it and biblical scholars know it. So it sounds like you were a normal, educated American who was never told, for whatever reason, there are lots of versions of the Bible because the Bible originated over millennia, and many different editors included and excluded various texts. Is that
Yeah, I
the
mean,
bottom line?
I probably wasn't told, but if I was, I didn't care.
Okay, got it.
And
All
just,
right.
The Bible, everyone refers to the Bible, the Bible, the Bible. I mean,
Right, that's true.
you mentioned going back to like the Hebrew text. I'll probably talk about this as we go forward, but one of my questions was, what do the Jews say about all this? So I bought the Jewish Study Bible, which they call it the Bible, Jewish Study Bible, but that's where they go line by line through the Old Testament, telling you what they think about it. I'm amazed when I run into Christians and I start talking about what I learned in this Jewish Study Bible or this, that, like, they believe a version of Judaism that they're just told by their church, and didn't inquire of the Jews whether they believe that. And then when I talk about my book and this whole concept that I have of looking into what the Bible is, I get the same reaction that you're talking about. It's every single person in every single church seems to believe that whatever Bible they have is the true, authentic Bible handed down from the earliest time, and they never looked into that. They can't explain why that is. They just trust that that's what it is. And everyone's being handed a different Bible and told that story. Wow. It's too simplistic. It's not remotely true. And I don't care what church you go to. It's just, it's kind of like telling kids that the babies come from the stork or something. Yeah. Like, this is not a mature adult way of looking at the world, but it is the way that I run into all the time with people.
That's so sad. So in other words, there's kind of a two-tier knowledge system now in which theologians and Bible scholars know perfectly well that this is a text. All of them are texts that evolved over time with emendations and omissions and editors and so on. And each church, and I've run into this too, people will quote the King James Version as if it is the authoritative word of God, and not something that was, commissioned by King James. Right?
Well, and then, so as somebody who read this late or whatever, and then I'm trying to use, in my book, I use the King James Version as the standard English version, etc. But like, I have to translate the King James Version for because like it's not even readable in its own language. Like, it's there are choices that people make as you interpret things and as you do things, and some of their choices are terrible. They use the word he to refer to each person, two men talking, and they're both called he throughout the conversation. You can't figure out who's who. All these sorts of things that are in there. Like it is bizarre that people don't understand that. I kind of wish that every church would just read the Bible in the original Greek out loud and then translate it for you.
I really think that would be a wonderful idea.
It would show the people what's really going on. Like, yes, this is our translation. We trust it, but understand it's a translation.
And I just have to note as a Jew that when you say they should read
that would be the New Testament.
The New Testament, exactly. Yeah. Wow. So that makes me really sad. People are really being kept in the dark about something very important and profound. And
I don't agree that they're kept in the dark, because it's not, I mean, you can find all this on Wikipedia, right? It's not in the dark. It's an unwillingness to look past the simplistic childish story they've been given.
Sure. Right? But to be fair, if they are being told by their pastors, this is God's word, it hasn't changed, that's a fib. And their pastors, if they went to seminary, should know that it's a fib. But anyway, let's move on to the subject of your thesis. So your main thesis is that you were an unbeliever. And so you spent your whole life as an unbeliever?
Yeah, my grandfather had been Catholic, so my mom went to Catholic schools. But all she really taught me was she hated the nuns. So by then we weren't, there was no praying, reading the Bible, going to church, that kind of thing for most of my
Mhm.
life. So I just didn't care.
Right.
And when I encountered Christians in my life, again, as I coming to all this late and looking back on things, virtually every conversation I ever had with a Christian was that I should come join them because you have beautiful singing or a great
Mm.
basketball program for kids or some
Right.
others. Like I can't believe that no one would say you should be Christian because it's true. That
No
is
one
to
said
me,
that? What part of the country
not
do you
really.
live in? This is
Oh,
weird.
I lived all over, but
Right.
Massachusetts, Texas,
No one said
Ohio,
I have a
everywhere. Yeah,
personal relationship with Jesus and
they
he
might, but that doesn't mean that it's true. Like you telling me that is no different than a Mormon telling me they have a personal relationship with the angel Mormon or whatever, or
right.
Islam,
Right.
etc.
There is a worldwide rush for gold right now and precious metals. China is buying gold. There are rumors that the Federal Reserve will be using gold to pay off federal debt, or the federal government will be using gold to pay off federal debt. Um, Famous investors are buying gold. And there's a movement away from the dollar worldwide. And you can see that there are warning signs in the economy that appeared before the Great Depression in 2008 that are flashing red right now. So, in all this instability, it is a very good idea to protect your savings, to protect your IRA by diversifying into precious metals, especially gold. There are a lot of gold companies out there. Not all of them are kosher. Not all of them are responsible businesses. American Alternative Assets really is, and we're very, very proud to have them as a sponsor. We're very picky about our sponsors, and we only accept sponsors who have products that we either use or invest in ourselves. So I really encourage you to go to cloutgold.com, CLOUTGOLD.com, and get a free report explaining to you what the risks are of not diversifying into gold and silver. And I just want to know that when Brian and I started talking about investing in gold 5 years ago, when it first became clear that you could do that easily, if we'd put in $1,000 then, it would be 5,000 now. If we'd put in 10,000 then, it would be 50,000 now, and so on. So obviously, you can't predict everything about the future, but gold there's a limited amount of it on the planet, and in a time when you can have your assets switched off if they're digital, like the truckers in Canada had their bank account switched off. People in Spain are having their bank account switched off. All of China is now on a social credit system. Your assets can be switched off, and Europe is pushing for central bank digital currency. Now is the time to diversify into gold.
It was either a touchy feely thing inside their heart,
Right.
as opposed to no. Jesus was a real person. He rose from the dead. That in Paul, for example, I think it's in the epistle to 1 Corinthians, where he says, if Jesus didn't rise from the dead, then we are of all men most to be pitied. And so the early Christian view was the reason to believe Christianity was because this miracle had really happened. He really did rise from the dead. And for some reason, I don't encounter a lot of people who preach that when they're talking to somebody. It's more like, just come join me. It's beautiful singing. You should see what we do on Sunday. And I'm like, why would I join your cult? Because you have good singing.
Wow.
So,
You must have been popular.
Well, it was.
So as a non-believer, or a skeptic, what gave your life meaning before you had this?
Just general happiness. I didn't search for meaning. I didn't care. I viewed the world as just, this is the only life you have. So live it as best you can. Life
Do
is
you have
easy.
children?
No.
Right. Easier to feel that way when you don't have
Yeah,
children, I think.
exactly. Yeah.
Right. All right. So let's move on. So your first claim from your research is that the early church accepted which became the Catholic Church. I'm not sure what you mean by the Catholic Church. Accepted various what are now apocryphal books of the Bible. Is that your first claim?
Yeah. So to be clear, the only part of Catholicism that matters for purposes of my book, etc., is that the Catholics accept these particular books and the Protestants don't.
Wait,
So they're called
Mr. McWhorter, what Catholics? Modern Catholics?
Both.
10th century Catholics? What are you talking about?
Both. The point is that the Catholics accept the books, Protestant don't. So the books are known as the Catholic books, right? They're the Catholic Apocrypha. There are other books that are Orthodox Apocrypha because the Orthodox accept them, but the Catholics don't. And then there's other books that are just Apocrypha because nobody accepts them. But this label Apocrypha is kind of problematic. So it's the key for purposes of my book is I'm just looking at the books the Catholics accepted, what Protestants rejected.
All right. And what are these books? I mean, you don't have to enumerate all of them if they're
so there's
many.
Basically 9 in total. Some of them are pieces of books or chapters, etc. But they're Susanna, Baruch, pieces of Esther, and then there's Tobit, Judith, Sirach, Wisdom, 1 and 2 Maccabees.
Okay.
And so they're a very diverse group. They have nothing in common except for the fact that you'll find them in a Catholic Bible and an Orthodox Bible, but won't find them necessarily in a Protestant Bible.
And why is that important? I mean, no disrespect to you, but I think most people who have studied biblical history know that Catholics included books of the Apocrypha that Protestants removed from their authoritative text.
No. Most Protestant teaching actually is that Catholics added books later, not the Protestants removed them. And that's a key part of my book is showing that that's false.
Okay. Who says, sorry?
The evidence. That's the point of my book is if you ask what happened historically, we look at the evidence. Yeah, exactly.
Mr. Lawyer, let me ask my question, please. Yep. Okay, this is not a court of law.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand what you're saying. You said Protestants say that Catholics added apocryphal books later rather than that Protestants removed them. Yep. And you're saying you have found that the evidence is to the contrary. Which Protestants? The formal statements from the chief policymakers of various Protestant sects? I mean, there are many sects of Protestants. I don't know who you're talking about.
I quote them in my book, for example. But I mean, the leading Protestant book on the leading book of, as far as I can tell at all, on the canon. The canon, it's CANON. It's the canon of Scripture, not like the weapon. But the leading book on the canon on what are the correct books of the Bible, as bestseller of all time, as far as I can tell, is from Michael Kruger. And Professor Michael Kruger at Protestant Seminary, and his book will tell you that the Catholics added the books later.
Okay, so
that is the basic teaching of not all Protestants. Again, Protestants a label; it's a diverse group. There certainly are groups that have an even broader Bible than the Orthodox, for example.
Right. So I don't understand how he can say that because
I don't either. That's my point. Is that it's not true. But that's the thing that's going on here is that people are making statements without having examined the evidence first.
Can I just
go look at the evidence and then you'd find out that it's not true? Yeah.
Can I finish what I was going to say?
Yep.
Those books, at least some of them, are in the 1560 Geneva Bible, which is a Protestant Bible.
Yep, I know. I'm not arguing with you. He's the one who wrote it. Ask him why he's saying it. But my point is that is the true teaching of these people. They are saying that their Bible was the original one and Catholics added it all later.
They're saying that Bible was the Protestant Bible without these apocryphal books. Okay.
The modern Bible that they're reading, what they say that, well, that was the original Bible. And Kruger's book is actually about, and this is where this canon crossfire comes in. He's trying to prove that the New Testament is authentic. That contrary to the skeptics out there who say that the New Testament's a fraud, etc., he's trying to show that it's true. As part of that, he's saying, well, you can trust the early church to have passed on the true, authentic documents because there were these other fake books going around at the time. You could, and historians and archaeologists have found them, scraps of these other books. And Kruger's trying to say, well, no, the 27 books of the modern New Testament, of the New Testament that we have, are the true books. And as part of that, he's saying you can trust the early church to have passed on the truth, to pass on the correct books. And so he says in a footnote, he says, well, you might try to object with this Catholic claim that the earliest church actually accepted these additional books, but that's false. And he goes into his discussion of why he thinks that's false. And that it was part of my journey was reading that and being a person who double checks things, saying, well, okay, these are two different claims, this Catholic claim and Kruger's claim. Which one's right? And the answer is the Catholic claim.
Right.
And
okay.
That's the point that I'm trying to make as part of my book. And we talked about it earlier about how some of these things, they're not hidden.
Right.
And in a lot of cases, if you just follow what the scholar says in the footnote, you'd realize that he's contradicting what he said up above.
Right.
And that there's just there's an understanding generally that these books were accepted, but they try to bury it in a footnote. They try to push it off to the side. And in Kruger's case, he kind of forgot that there's these footnotes to what he's saying, that actually there were these extra books that were accepted. And
what do you mean by were accepted?
All of the earliest evidence from the earliest Christians shows that they accepted these books. There's
I have to stop you right there. All of the evidence from the earliest Christians, like, respectfully, are you talking 1st century, 2nd century, 3rd century, 4th century, 5th century? This is
my book. The point of my book is I review what every single Christian said in the first 450 years of Christianity. I wanted to find that book. I wanted to find someone who would show me it. So you can draw your own dividing lines wherever you want. But on Susanna, for example, it is accepted in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th centuries. In at least as far as I can tell, 450, there's not one person who rejects the book of Susanna. All the
do they say they accept it? I mean, when you say accept it, I guess just let me talk for a minute, okay? It's important. First of all, respectfully, 1st century Christianity was something that wasn't even established yet, right? There were Jewish Christians, there were pagan Christians. It was, in some places a secret cult, in other places it was sanctioned. I mean, there were no canonical bound texts. The letters of Paul to the church were letters. They weren't scripture yet. So respectfully, I really reject, I think you're being anachronistic in reading back into the 1st century. I mean, just look.
What you just said is based on evidence, right? You looked at the evidence and you say, well, this is the way that Christianity looks. That's what I wanted to know.
You're calling it Christianity, but these were various diverse people following the teachings of this mystery figure who had been crucified. It became known as Christianity and solidified into a theology over the course of the next 4 centuries. But
let's look at the evidence. What did they say at the 1st century? That's all I want to know.
But
what did people say about?
There wasn't a New Testament in this, bound and distributed in the same way that there is now in the 1st century.
Fully. I understand. All I wanted to do was stop talking to people where they explained to me what they think the 1st century was like. I wanted to read from the original people in the 1st century. All right,
so when you say, let's just drill down in, just let me just speak for one more moment. I'm reading a book right now, for instance, by Robert Eisenman, who was rarely permitted by the Catholic keepers of the Dead Sea Scrolls in Jerusalem that were found in the caves of Qumran, near the Dead Sea in the 1940s. He was allowed to look at them and translate them, and they show what he believes to be a group following the brother of Jesus, and they're radical Jews in the middle of the desert following the brother of Jesus and someone they call the righteous teacher. And their conclusion is, let's be more zealous for the law. Let's be like more Jewish. So I guess my point is, what became Christianity evolved over time. Followers of Yeshua in the 1st century took many, many forms, including this one, very likely according to Robert Eisenman. So and that information was, lost for millennia and even is now kind of guarded and protected, and he had a battle to get access to it. So let's go now so I just want to reiterate to everyone, things didn't look all tied with a bow. This is a Christian, and this is a Christian Bible or canonical text in the 1st century, respectfully. By the 4th century, you had the church fathers and you had a developed theology, and you had, conferences where the formal policies of Christianity were being locked in. And when Constantine embraced Christianity as a state religion, you had the state's endorsement of Christianity, locked and loaded, right? But I just respectfully don't think you're right for the first 4 centuries in
I
referring to.
I
Mhm.
I think you're confused. I wanted to know what every person said about these books, and the only people who talked about these books, whether they were accepted or part of Christianity, are people who claim to be Christian. That's it. I wanted to know what
Okay.
they said. I don't want to know what the professor is telling me. He thinks he's interpreting these things. That's what I don't trust. I wanted
All
to know
right.
what
So
the
what did they
earliest
say
people
about,
said.
what did people in the you're saying first century who called themselves Christians say
Yes.
about the book of Susanna?
So the question, Susanna is part of Daniel. It's a chapter of the book of Daniel, and the question is whether it is part of the authentic Daniel that
Okay.
was handed down by the actual physical apostles. Did the people, you have these claims, as you say, there's people claiming, brothers of Christ, etc. Um, the Christian claim, the modern Christian claim, is that there are authentic individuals who were the true apostles of Jesus, and they handed down certain books, etc. And the question is, well, what Daniel were they saying was handed down?
Okay.
In the first century, that is the Greek Daniel that people are using at the time called the Septuagint.
Hmm.
By the second century, that becomes a version also in Greek called the Theodotion.
Hmm.
Both of those Greek versions included Susanna.
Hmm.
And in the second century, we have people clearly referencing the chapter that is Susanna.
Okay.
So in the first century, the evidence would be, well, it's circumstantial, but it's based on using these Greek versions that did include it. In the second century, you would have, actual quotes from it. And then you also have the New Testament itself, which is making references to various versions of Daniel, and which version can get a little whether we even have the version that they're referencing can get a little debated, but there are references to this Septuagint version as well. So that's what the evidence is showing you going up to that point. What you make of it's up to you, but the point is that that's what the evidence is. And I wanted to know what the evidence was, and so then I went out and tried to assemble it, and I give it to people for them to read. So I find the quotes where people are using these versions of Daniel. I show you how that matches back up, and you make of it what you want. But what I wanted to do was know what everybody in the first 450 years ever said about these books within Christianity, within what would become Christianity, however you want to describe it. I just want to know what they said. I don't want to hear from some professor. I want to
So
hear what they said.
you're saying the book of Susanna is not a separate book. It was included in
It's
Daniel.
so if you go back, I can't remember the Geneva Bible, but if you went back to the 1611 King James version, Susanna is a separate book in that. In a Catholic Bible, Susanna is chapter 13 of Daniel. And
Okay.
so people can look at it different ways. It's a separate story all by itself. It's basically about Daniel's childhood, and that's not in the Protestant version of Daniel, but it's in this. As I say, it's in the Catholic version. The question is, where does that come from? How did it do that? And as I say, you go back in time, you'll find it in the Septuagint version, you'll find it in the Theodosian version, and you'll find the church as it goes forward in time referring to it.
Okay. I mean, Daniel is in the Hebrew Bible, right?
There is a version of Daniel that it was done in Hebrew, but it's also done in Aramaic. It's already a bilingual version in its own right. And then there is a Greek version of Daniel.
But those
And
are later translations from the Hebrew.
so, no, Susanna is not in the Hebrew, right? That's the point.
No, but
That
Daniel is a book from the Hebrew Bible, so much earlier than these post Jesus Christ translations.
no, those translations actually are far earlier than Jesus Christ, the Greek translations, particularly the Septuagint version. And the belief is that at least some of the quotes of Daniel in the Bible are coming from the Greek version, not the Hebrew version. Again, the New Testament is actually written in Greek. It's not, it's uncertain as to what version the apostles were using, but it seems like they at least had access to the Septuagint version when they were writing.
I guess what I'm trying to say is all those people, until Paul's outreach to pagans in the first century, were Jews and a few Samaritans. So they would have read Daniel in the Torah in Hebrew.
No, That is exactly what the dispute is over what did the Jews who became Christian look like at that time. And the belief that they were all only on the Hebrew version is part of what I say. Like, I went out and grabbed the Jewish study Bible to find out what Jews say about Judaism at the time of Christ. And they do not believe that at the time everything was in Hebrew. And they know, they'll tell you their own review of the evidence is that clearly Greek versions were accepted and preached, and some of these books were only available in Greek. Some of them might have been available in multiple versions, etc. But their view was Judaism is a diverse group, and claims that there was only one version or only one way to look at the world are a later development.
Well, I'm not saying that, obviously. So let's not have a straw person here. What I'm saying is I'm looking at Chabad.org, and I'm looking at Daniel chapter 1, and it's in Ketuvim, and the word, the Hebrew Bible in Hebrew is Tanakh, Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim. So it's in the last section of the Torah, and it's about the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, king of Babylon. So it's recounting events, maybe it was written later, that go back, millennia, centuries before the first century, before the rise of Greece. So I'm
Right.
not sure. Okay.
But there's a version of Daniel that includes this story, Susanna.
Okay.
That comes in Greek. So the question would be,
And
did
it's
somebody
not,
make
well, bear with
it's
me.
not been found in Hebrew, does not mean that it's not in Hebrew.
Let's not raise our voices.
I know, but
So there is no Susanna in Hebrew?
We have not found the scrap of paper that has Susanna in Hebrew. No.
There's, scrap of paper. I mean, these texts are passed down in many ways, and the Hebrew Bible was on hides and scrolls. But let me go to Susanna in Torah. Tanakh. So you're saying this was not okay. Well, let's go to something more useful instead of arguing. Susanna is a figure from the biblical book of Daniel, a righteous Jewish woman falsely accused of adultery by two corrupt elders. And there are many, many depictions in art of Susanna and the elders. And I'm looking at the Jewish Women's Archive, and they list Susanna as apocrypha. And they do confirm what you're saying, that Susanna's story comes from Greek manuscripts of the Book of Daniel and is included in the Christian but not Jewish canon. It was written during the Hellenistic period, so you're correct that it was later than most of the Torah was written, after Alexander the Great's conquest, and it depicts a wealthy Babylonian woman. And so the brief self-contained story of Susanna appears in Greek but not Hebrew manuscripts of the Book of Daniel. Most modern editions of the Christian Bible included among the apocryphal deuterocanonical books of Daniel 13. So, I mean, everything you're saying is validated by the Shelby Hyman Encyclopedia of Jewish Women, and that matters to me because I used to know Alice Shelby. She was a family friend. But I guess what I'm saying is that website that I consulted confirms that there's a Hellenistic or Greek version of the story of Susanna. It's part of Christian Bibles, not part of the Tanakh. But I don't understand your sense of it. What's the controversy? Like,
there's several controversies. So number one is, she says that it's invented basically in the Hellenistic area and added, as opposed to a theory that it actually pre-existed and we just haven't found the Hebrew version of it, right? That is,
how can you prove a negative?
Exactly. But if you did find an ancient Hebrew scrap of paper that had it, that would prove that it was, right? That hasn't been found. So that is part of the dispute, is whether or not it really does go all the way back and is just lost in the Hebrew version.
That's a very common situation with a lot of ancient texts.
I understand. Yeah, absolutely. But the question is, what does the evidence show? That's all I wanted to know. And the evidence shows that they haven't found a Hebrew version, for example. That's one piece of the evidence. Right. Second piece of the evidence is, what happened to the Greek version of Daniel, and why did the Jews ultimately only accept the Hebrew version? And the Jews themselves will tell you that these decisions came late. They came after Christ. They come after the fall of the temple. But there is a movement to go back to the Hebrew first version. And there actually is
I'm sorry, you're saying Jews accepted the book of Daniel late?
the
After the exile?
The Jews do not even include Daniel as a prophet, in part because there was controversy over whether to accept it at all because of Christian use of the book of Daniel. So remember, there's all these other books out there. There's all these
I'm sorry, what you're saying is just not accurate. I mean, the book of Daniel isn't every...
I'm sorry, I took it from the Jewish Study Bible. If I'm wrong, it's...
Well, I mean, that's, I guess, one source, and I'm not sure what you mean by not accepted, but is the book of Daniel in your Jewish Study Bible?
Yes, of course, but they're explaining why they have it in the book. That's what I'm reading.
It's in I could go around this house and pick up a bunch of Torahs and show you the book of Daniel.
I understand, but why don't you have Susanna then? And the answer is that they're explaining that in this, as part of their study Bible, they're explaining where it comes from, why you have the particular books that are included in the Jewish Tanakh, and where that derives from. And what they're saying is, look, those decisions were made over time. They were made post-Christianity, and that is the dispute that I'm dealing with in my book, is that there is a kind of Protestant who says, no, there was no dispute. These books were clear, had a clearly limited Jewish canon at the time of Christ. And my point is, that's not what the Jewish scholarship says.
Well, no one thinks that who's got any education at all, but I
don't disagree with you, but that's the point of my book, is to show people what the actual evidence is so that they can see it.
I certainly don't agree with you that Jews long prior to the birth of Christianity did not accept the book of Daniel. The book of Daniel is an important
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the Jews, after Christianity had arisen, were still debating whether or not to throw out Daniel. And
that may well be true.
That's from the Jewish Study Bible explaining to it. That's all my point is that they were still debating what the Jewish canon would be. They had not yet agreed on a Jewish canon. So what books would be part of it, et cetera, was still being an evolving issue at the time of Christ. That's the point.
Can I just say, you're respectfully, you're not right about the Torah, the prophets, and the writings. That was established canon. The additional books.
That's not what the Jewish Study Bible says. So argue with them. I don't know.
The Tanakh. Oh, I respectfully, I think you should use more than one source for scholarship.
I did. I used many.
All right.
But that's the one I'm quoting in my book. But the point is, they had a division of 3 books, but what was included in them was still debated. There was not, there is no evidence of exactly what the list of books was.
Well, that's certainly true. The Tanakh became canonical through a gradual multi-century process. That's correct, finalized generally between 200 BCE and 200 CE, with its 3 sections, Torah, prophets, writings, solidifying at different times, the writings being last to be fully accepted around the 1st or 2nd century CE. While traditional Jewish sources point to earlier compilation, modern scholars see a longer evolution. So there's, disagreement about this, with the final form of the 24 books becoming authoritative after the destruction of the Second Temple, so that's the 1st century, largely reflecting Pharisaic rabbinic consensus. So
exactly.
The key stages are Torah, canonized first by the 4th century BCE, Nevi, and let me just note how early that is. Nevi'im, prophets, accepted as authoritative by the 2nd century BCE, and the last section, which sounds like what you're talking about, Ketuvim, or writings, the final section with books like Daniel completed later, mid 2nd century BCE, likely fixed around 100 of the Common Era, or even later, with debates continuing until the 2nd century CE. So I will concede your point for the, some writings in the 3rd book. The canonical nature of them were still being debated in the 1st century. The first 2 books were canonical by the 1st century, by the exile.
Everyone agrees that the Jewish people accepted a core number of books. The question is, what's on the edges of that? And the question is whether those edges extend to these Catholic books that the Catholics accept, or whether they had cut off before that.
All right, well, let's move. I don't think Jews would agree that that's their question, because Catholicism came later. and whatever books Catholics want.
My point is that if you lock up those times, the Jews would probably tell you that it has more to do with the fall of the temple than with Christianity. But regardless, the point is that the time comes after Christ.
Okay, let's move on. I mean, I'm just going to say respectfully, from a Christian perspective, the important benchmark is Christ's lifetime. From a Jewish perspective, you had the destruction of the Second Temple in the first century AD, 70 AD, and the forced exile of the people of, what is now Palestine and Israel into the Mediterranean and what is now Iraq, Iran, all across North Africa, the scattering of the people who had lived in Israel and the the forced kind of invention of rabbinical Judaism because there was no more temple. So I don't agree that the life of Jesus was the most determining thing for the rabbis who are trying to
I'm not arguing over that. Of course that's true. But the point I'm making is that my book is about the Christian canon. So the question is, what was the Jewish canon at the time of Christ? Because that relates to what was Jesus and the apostles teaching.
Oh, okay. All right. Fair enough. So you're saying Susanna was part of it and it got removed by Protestant theologians and leaders.
Yes.
Okay. So we're running low on time and I'm just looking around because I don't want to have my computer die. And let me just plug it in. Yep. I do need to plug it in for sure. So let's skip ahead to I guess the most interesting thing about your theory is that you're arguing that Protestantism pruned some aspects of accepted Christian canonical texts and then said they didn't, which, if that's true, would be a big deal. Why is there some big picture commonality about the books that you say they did prune? And what do you think the reasons are that if they did, that they pruned these and then said they didn't?
Yeah, to me, when I look into what happened, at the Reformation, et cetera, it seems pretty clear to me that they didn't like the doctrines that derive from these books.
Hey everyone, it's Naomi Wolf. I want to talk about microplastics. Microplastics are infiltrating every aspect of our lives. Some studies estimate that we now consume a credit card's worth of plastic every day through our food, water, and even in the air that we breathe. One study found plastic particles in 100% of human living samples. Nobody is safe from exposure, and it gets worse. These particles don't just sit inertly in your body. They cross the gut lining and leach into your blood, and they disrupt everything. They alter the gut bacteria, suppress immune response, and raise the risk of neurodegenerative diseases, metabolic disorders, and even cancer. Some plastic toxins, such as BPH and phthalates, mimic hormones, interfering with fertility and even damaging DNA. Even if you eat clean and avoid processed foods, you can't opt out. But your gut can help you fight back. Kimchi 1 from Bright Core Nutrition is a potent ally in this toxic world. Created with over 900 probiotic strains unique to kimchi, it's proven to break down BPA, helping you detox from the inside out. It doesn't just support digestion. It protects cells, your brain, your hormones, and your future. Your body was never designed to handle plastic, but your gut can protect you if you give it the right tools. Get 25% off this incredible product by using the code WOLF at mybrightcore.com/wolf, or even better, call my friends at Brightcore and get 50% off plus free shipping. That's 888-575-4996. You've got to protect yourself. Thank you.
That the Catholic Church had adopted, and as part of breaking off from that, they felt that a way to get rid of those doctrines was to get rid of these books. So then they sort of seize on this argument that, well, those books were never original. They were never part of the original Christianity. We're going to get back to the original Christianity. But, all of this is in 1525 AD. This is barely out of the Middle Ages. Their understanding of history was not very good. And they didn't realize that actually the history is on the side of these books.
Okay, so you're saying Protestant reformers in the 16th century made mistakes.
Yes, that's my view. I leave it to the reader to determine their own. As I say, my goal was to produce the evidence that I looked into for three things. What did the Jews say about these books? What did the earliest Christians say about them? And what does the New Testament possibly say about them? I hand it all to the reader, and you can make whatever you want of it. My own view is, as you say, that it was a mistake from the beginning, and people should recognize that.
Well, so what are the I don't understand what Susanna and the elders is kind of a morality story. I'm surprised you didn't mention Enoch, the book of Enoch. Is that also?
Well, one Enoch is accepted by the Orthodox, but not by the Catholics. So it's not the focus of my book. I do have a chapter devoted to it, to discussing it, because it is of huge importance, as you say. But it's not technically within the confines of what I wanted to produce. Only the book's 500 pages of producing the evidence just on these Catholic books. To cover one Enoch would require a second volume. So.
Okay, so what are, you say that they probably didn't like the, policies or the kind of...
Yeah, particularly purgatory and the concepts of how you can pay penance for your sins, etc. Those were things that they did not like, and those are clearly addressed in 2 Maccabees. And as part of trying to get rid of 2 Maccabees, I think they threw out all the books, because they have this argument that if you just go back to what the Jews have to, in 1500 AD or today, doesn't include those books. So let's say that that's the original Bible, and then we could get rid of all 2 Maccabees plus these extras. But I don't think, like Susanna, I don't think Susanna's really the objection, right? Like, it's not the target that they were trying to get rid of. It's really 2 Maccabees.
Okay, you're saying the Protestant reformers didn't like 2 Maccabees because they thought it provided the basis for the practice of selling indulgences, which is what the Catholic Church was doing at that time, that they thought was very corrupt.
Exactly. But 2 Maccabees doesn't necessarily deal with that. That would be a doctrine derived from 2 Maccabees. But what 2 Maccabees has is an offering given to the priests at the temple on behalf of people who are already dead, which implies that you could still make a difference to somebody's eternal judgment after they're dead. And that leads to, when you start thinking about it, other concepts like purgatory, etc.
But don't Protestants have a concept of purgatory?
No, again, a Protestant's a diverse category. So there are people, it's kind of a spectrum, but there is a large segment of Protestantism that absolutely rejects it.
So,
in fact, they reject, by the way, just even praying for the dead, right?
Right. And what about the other books that you mentioned? You mentioned 9 books that got...
Yeah, so I think what happened is that in order to get rid of 2 Maccabees, they chose this dividing line, which was, we're going to go with what they call the Jewish canon, the modern Jewish canon. And that meant the other 8 books also went. But I think if you ask me what was really motivating it, it's one of the 9 books. But the others are sort of collateral damage, right?
But I mean, respectfully, the people who translated the 1560 Geneva Bible said explicitly that they wanted to get as close to kind of the Jewish text as they could.
Yes, exactly. I think that is part of their motivation, etc. But if you're asking what's going on psychologically and why they went down this road in the first place, I believe it's derived from they didn't like the doctrines, therefore they wanted to exclude these books.
Okay. Yeah. Well, so what are some other... So you're saying they just threw out the other kind of accumulated extra Jewish books because they were accumulated?
Throw out is kind of a unfair judgment to the people of the 16th century, because they included them, right? They have them. They just have it in a different section of the Bible, but they still had them. The real throwing out actually occurs in like the 1800s. And it kind of has to do with the cost of printing a Bible, et cetera. But people stopped even including them in a different section. And then the story sort of evolved of, well, The Catholics just added those books later. That's why we don't have them. And that's kind of where my book is coming in and saying, look, that is way too simplistic. That is not what happened at all. And trying to show people that with the original evidence.
Okay. You're saying sorry, this is a little hard to follow. Yeah. You're saying which is my experience, the 16th century Protestant reformers' Bibles included the Apocrypha, all of those books, which is my experience. They're right there in the 1560 Geneva Bible. So they didn't throw them out. And they
pushed them off to the side, but they didn't.
There's nothing wrong with calling them Apocrypha.
Well, it would be wrong if they were true scripture, right? But they're putting them. They're sort of creating a different category to put them in, right?
That's a normal editorial process.
It's an editorial process based on a belief, right? And the question I had,
processes are based on beliefs.
I understand. My question was just, what does the evidence show about these beliefs? That's all I wanted to know. But the point is that they themselves at that time, you have the Catholic or Orthodox who would say they were scripture, not in a separate section. Right. They themselves said, okay, we're going to have a Bible, plus we're going to have this extra section, and we're going to be a little ambiguous as to what the extra section means, but it's not scripture like the rest of the book. And then over time, people cut off that extra section and just said, this is the Bible.
To save money on printing Bibles, because Apocrypha means not canonical.
Not authentic, scripture. not real, however they want to look at it.
That's not what Apocrypha means. It doesn't mean not authentic. It means not necessarily authoritative scripture.
No, I think the term can, again, the word Apocrypha is just an awkward word. It has many different contexts, but they would for example, Christians refer to New Testament Apocrypha, which we are absolutely saying is not authentic. So it's just a complicated word, but I understand what you're saying, that in the section that the reformers would have put it in the 1600s, they did not mean these are to be ignored. They meant they are, close to scripture, but not quite fully scripture.
Or that there's some question about their provenance, or some question about how valid they are. But Apocrypha is a well understood.
That's why they were in the Bible, right? There's other ones that they didn't even include in the Bible.
Right.
These were included because they do see some value in them. And as you say, it's just more ambiguous as to what they wanted to do, but they weren't excluding it, throwing it out.
All right. So the Apocrypha have a more specific meaning elsewhere, and it's a collection of Jewish writings often included in older Bibles, but as you say, excluded from modern Protestant canons. Containing historical accounts, wisdom, literature, and prophetic stories from the period between the Old and New Testaments, and it provides valuable context for ancient Jewish life, but differs in canonical status across denominations, as you say, with Catholics calling them deuterocanonical books, and Protestants often placing them in a separate section or omitting them entirely. Okay, and these are the ones: Tobit, Judith, Wisdom of Solomon, Sirach, Ecclesiastes, Baruch, and 1 and 2 Maccabees. And you're saying the Protestants should not omit them. Why do you care if the Protestants omit them?
I don't care. You could form whatever cult or religion you want. But if the question is, what did Jesus actually teach? That's a historical, if I want to know what Julius Caesar said, that's a historical
that's fair.
Review.
Yeah.
That's what I want to go back to.
I agree with you that you're better off safe if you want to know what Jesus taught and read, to include the Apocrypha. Totally agree with you about that.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I wanted to look at. Because again, I was reading that these things were fake and added by the Catholics in the 1600s.
But I don't understand who would say that. No one thinks that these books are fake.
You'll find it all over the place. Actually, it is a common. It's sort of, if you split Protestant by denominations, that's more of a Baptist or fundamentalist view. But it's very common. And I talk to people on the streets nowadays, and most of that occurs near a Lutheran college, of all things.
Oh, really?
But even Lutherans that I meet, like the people in the pews, tend to believe that. Again, like I said, it's just a simplistic view of, well, this is the Bible I was handed, this is the true. Like, right. Well, where did that come from? Why are you saying that? Most people have no idea. And that's where
I could see a Protestant denomination saying, we don't believe this. we don't include it, but it's not accurate to say these are fake. Obviously, they're not fake, and they're well
Yeah,
attested.
no, I mean, I agree with you. That was the review of the evidence, was to find out who's telling the truth and who's not, and what's real and what's not. But
All right,
there's people, you'll find it all over. Yeah,
that's really depressing.
yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for having borne with me during this sometimes contentious interview, because I was trying to figure out, like, what is the main importance of what you've done. And I think that is important. If American Protestants are being told these, historically valid sacred texts that Jews were teaching and reading in, for the centuries before and after Jesus walked the earth, if they're being told that's fake, whereas in fact Jesus, as a historical figure, did certainly read them and teach them and know them, then that's a very big lie. And you're doing a great thing in correcting the record. I hope a lot of American Protestants listen to you about that. Now, having said that, let's go to your personal journey, because we're close to the end of our time together. You became a Catholic as a result of this investigation?
Yeah, I mean, the first question I had was just, what is the right Bible, right? And so when I started looking into what is the right Bible, as I say, personally, I decided pretty quickly it was not the Protestant Bible. And that, many steps from there, choices of which church is correct, et cetera, I ended up deciding that it was the Catholic Church. But for purpose of my book, that has nothing to do with anything. It is a review of the evidence about these Catholic apocrypha, but it's not a Catholic book trying to promote Catholicism or anything like that.
Okay, so your bottom line is these thrown out books have historical validity. They were part of the canon or part of the sacred texts when Jesus walked the earth. You shouldn't throw them out. That was a mistake, and bring them back in. Right?
Yeah, exactly. That's 100% my view. And part of that is, as I say, it's this canon crossfire. It's that I don't think you can prove that, you follow the historical evidence back to the truth. If you reject the historical evidence on these books, that's going to be held against you when you try to prove the historical validity of Jesus. So that's where I, you're asking me to believe two things at the same time, and they're in conflict, and it doesn't work. So that's where the canon crossfire comes.
I'm just so depressed as a Jew that ignorance of Jesus's Jewish context is so overwhelming that people could think, or even anyone could tell anyone, that these fundamental books.
I literally, in one section of my book, I show you exactly what's called the Apologetic Study Bible, a Protestant Bible, is saying, and what the Jewish Study Bible is saying. And they're completely different stories. And I personally, all the time when I'm encountering people, the question of, do you realize the Jews don't believe that? They don't realize that the Jews don't believe that. They're being told a story and they're believing it, and they need to do a little more investigation.
I hate to do this because it's going to depress me for the rest of the day, but what do people think Jews believe that they don't believe?
Well, it comes back to this. I'm usually talking about the canon or whatever. That's like, they'll be telling me, well, the Jewish canon was long settled. Everybody knew what the books were in the Bible.
I see.
When Jesus was preaching, like, the Jews don't say that. Did you just walk down the street? It's kind of our conversation here. But it's like, the Jews know that wasn't true. That, there are these other books, etc. Like, where are you getting that? And the answer is they have never read what the Jews actually say for themselves.
Isn't our commentary literature full of references to the book of Daniel and Ecclesiastes and the wisdom literature, certainly parts of Esther? I mean, these are really important.
As I say, I have three prongs in my book. One is the early church, one is what the Jews say, but the third is, what does the Bible, what does the New Testament say? And that's exactly that point, that the New Testament itself is doing the same thing of making all those references. And yet you'll find these people say, no, it doesn't. It's like, well, again, you don't argue with me. I took all this out of Protestant scholarship. Go argue with, the people who wrote the evangelical, biblical, theological commentary. Like, they're writing to your preacher and telling you that Jesus was making these references. It seems obvious to us. It seems obvious to the Jews. It seems, why would you believe that they weren't making references? And anyway, for purposes of my book, I just give that to people. That's what was said. You make your own judgments, but it does seem so obvious when you look into it. And that's That's kind of why I produced the book the way I do,
Okay.
is trying to
All
show
right.
people what the evidence is.
Okay, thank you. Well, that makes sense to me now.
Yeah.
What kind of reaction have you been getting, both from readers and from scholars and from Protestant and Catholic leaders, if any?
Yeah, all 5-star reviews so far. My engagement
Wow.
with people, I've been, I'm willing to talk to anybody, talk about it. But the point is, I'm just presenting the evidence.
Right.
You
No,
can make
you've
of
made
it
that,
what you
you've made
want.
that clear. Well,
Exactly. But that's the
Mhm.
part where, like, it's hard to object to what I'm doing, right? Like, it's hard to say, well, I'm not writing a polemic trying to convert people. It's
Right,
just,
but
this
have
is
any
the evidence.
Protestant leaders said you're wrong or you've misunderstood what happened?
They either avoid all contact or they've liked the book. It's a
Oh,
divide.
wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And have any Catholic leaders or theologians said you're right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I have several endorsements on my webpage, et cetera. But again, it's, sort of as we were talking about, it's not really all that arguable. It's just a matter of getting people to look at the evidence and see that there was, Jewish acceptance of these books at the time, and that works itself out over the centuries, et cetera. But, like, if you don't even believe that, if you don't even acknowledge the evidence to that extent, you're just confused. Like,
But I mean, you could say, yeah, clearly, but how can I put this? Many, 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 many Christians and Christian leaders don't accept the Jewish heritage of Christianity and don't accept what Jesus said about his Jewishness and his relationship
yeah,
to the law. So maybe they're not wrong. They're just being consistent and saying, yeah, well, we're leaving that behind. I mean, I've been told there's a whole kind of replacement theology out there where preachers are saying, like, the covenant with the Jews no longer exists. It was superseded. Now we're the new children of Israel. We're the new chosen people. Um, do you understand what I'm saying? Maybe
yeah.
people are not,
It,
misinformed, but making a theological choice to reject the ancestry of Jesus and the roots of Christianity in Judaism.
I mean, Christianity has become like the label of apocrypha, although it really always was, as you said, back in the earliest days. But, like, there's just different versions of Christianity out there. And again, part of my job, my thought was to go back to the original and try to find out what was really said. But, like, there's absolutely all of that out there. You'll find that that's a different group than the group that I'm, my book's really directed at.
Interesting.
I would say that that's more of a, like I don't really find that so much on by denominations. I find that sort of in a non-denominational type of Christianity.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Ugh, what a mess.
Yeah.
And so last question, I promise. As someone who now, believes and embraces those 9 books in addition to the other sacred texts, what's the message? Like, why are those important? Like, how has it changed your life to include those books in your theology?
Yeah. So for me, it was whether or not you really could prove that Christ rose from the dead and Christianity is true, et cetera. So for me, as a lawyer looking at it, I don't think that case can be won without these extra books, because the way the evidence breaks down, and therefore it's a key part of me converting it all and saying, okay, this is true and I believe it. But
How do these books prove that Christ walked the earth and rose from the dead?
well, it's more that they don't disprove it. So if the Protestant says those books don't have enough evidence to be authentically Christian, all I'm going to do is take that and hold it against them and say, well, here's the evidence that you claim proves Christ. Here's the evidence for these extra books. You'll notice it's the same thing, and you're going to lose your case. So it's more that the Protestant admits that these, in legal terms, admits that these books are not proven. You're effectively admitting that you didn't prove your own case. And that's where the crossfire comes in. And what my concept is I was just reading these books, and they're piling up evidence for Christ. And I'm like, okay, that's, you piled up evidence. That's
I don't
you.
see how these books pile up evidence for Christ.
No. The people preaching that Christianity is true were piling up evidence saying we have the authentic gospels, right? We have the authentic eyewitness testimony of people who walked with Jesus. It's like, okay, that's evidence. I see that. But over here are these other books, and the same people are saying that those books came from the apostles, and you're saying that evidence is no good. You just admitted that your own case for Christianity doesn't work. That's the part that I think people have. They were making two different arguments. They're arguing with skeptics, saying we have all this evidence, come to Christ, and they're arguing with Catholics saying, well, you don't have nearly enough evidence. Like, put it together. They're the same evidence. That's the
Okay.
point that I'm trying to make. That's the crossfire that I saw because I was dealing with these questions at the same time.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So are you happy to be a Catholic?
Oh yeah, yeah. No. I believe it's true, and as I say, I don't really go into it in the book other than this initial piece. But you have to explore things far beyond this first question. But the first question for me is, what was the Bible that I'm supposed to be judging?
Right.
And ultimately, that led me into the Catholic Church. Been there for years now, and quite happy.
Wonderful. And which Bible do you use now?
A Catholic Bible. I'd say the one that I read the most is the Ignatius Study Bible.
The Ignatius Study Bible, because
yeah.
I'm sure I don't want to open up another hour of debate, which unfortunately we don't have time for. But in my comparison of the translations, I use the modern Revised Standard Version, which is a Catholic translation, to show how horribly mistranslated at least that modern version is. And a lot of modern versions are.
I actually, when I read the Bible, I read 100 commentaries and translations. So I would read like chapter 1 across all of them for exactly that reason. It's unbelievable how different the translations are, and huge choices are being made. And you may not agree with those choices.
Right. I really highly recommend that for, your next big project, you learn Hebrew, because that'll blow your mind, to see.
Like I said, the Jewish Study Bible walks you through line by line of what Jewish teaching is on it. That's as close as I've come. But yeah, congratulations on the Hebrew reading.
Oh no, that's fine. I can take no credit for it. I dove into that language when I was 5. But
thanks, Mom. Well done,
right.
Mom.
Right. Yeah. I had no choice at all. But wow. All right. Well, lots of food for thought. And I do love, what you've done is definitely something we really approve of on Daily Cloud, which is you did not take the experts' conclusions as given. You decided to find out for yourself. And all of us should do that. And I thoroughly believe it's in the spirit of what Jesus was teaching, that, and what the rabbis are teaching, that you should go look for yourself and check the evidence. So thank you. And we'll let you go. And I'm gonna and where do people find you and order your book?
CanonCrossfire.com. Again, it's CANON crossfire.com.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Matthew McWhorter. I'm now going to say goodbye to you and remove you from the studio so I can thank our sponsor. But thank you so much. And
thank you. God bless.
Thanks. And likewise. Thank you. All right, everyone. Wow. What an interesting subject. That's pretty fascinating. I want to tell you about gold. I want to tell you about American Alternative Assets because they are our sponsor and they have brought this to you. And you should know that right now there is a mad gold. Here we are. There is a mad gold rush in the world. And so what is going on? What do 3 billionaires, 4 major banks, and a legendary 92-year-old investor all have in common? They're making the same shocking prediction. Gold is headed for $10,000 or more. Goldman Sachs says gold will surge 20%. JP Morgan says 25%. And one respected economist now believes the US government could deliberately raise gold's official price to help pay off the national debt. And the world's wealthiest players are already making their moves. Now you can see exactly what they're seeing for free. Our friends, our wonderful sponsors at American Alternative Assets just released a powerful new report, The Surprising Case for $10,000 Gold. It breaks down the hidden signals, the central bank gold buying spree, and the way smart Americans are protecting their retirement with gold right now. So go to cloutgold.com to download it for free or call 855-803-GOLD. That's cloutgold.com or 855-803-GOLD. Don't wait. The window to get gold, the prices it's at now, is closing fast. As Brian and I often say, we first started talking about buying gold 5 years ago at the start of the pandemic, and we just never got around to it. And, we're very sad because whatever we had put in then would have quintupled almost by now. So don't make the mistake we made. Now we have an account with American Alternative Assets. And you need to, as well, diversify. As I've been saying, Zoran Mamdani in my home base of New York is threatening to privatize real estate. The digital currency could make your liquid savings very malleable. You could be switched off, and if you have gold, they can't take it away from you without a revolution. So you really need to diversify, take care of yourself, be skeptical, and do it today. You will not regret it. Well, you can never predict the future, but gold is one of those things. There's only so much of it. They're not making more of it, and it holds its value or goes up over time in my lifetime. So that being said, with all those caveats, I do think diversifying is so important, especially now. You just can't trust Wall Street with our well-being, or the stock market, or the government. So it's really, really good to diversify, especially into something that you can hold, store, look at, carry with you if you have to flee, and so on. So that's American Alternative Assets, cloutgold.com. Love you guys. I will see you soon. This has been Outspoken.